we'll start with Christian Friedel. The editor. Eva Puszczyńska, the producer. Mica, Levi, the composer. Johnnie, the sound editor. Łukasz, the cinematographer. And writer and director Jonathan Glazer. It's not in between. Sorry, I didn't know you were coming up, but great. The way we're going to do this, I'm just going to go down the list and ask questions. Anybody's free to jump in, but I want to make sure that I get to everyone, and we have 30 minutes, so we're going to just kind of charge ahead. And it does feel a little unfair. I can't imagine sitting through a Q&A after having just seen this film, because it took me, when I first saw it, quite a while to regather myself, because it's an astonishing work of art, and it's really an honor to be here with all of you. I think it's a magnificent accomplishment. So Jonathan, I'm going to start with you, and I want to ask you, first of all, about adapting Martin Amis's book, because I read the novel when it came out. The film is not really like the novel at all. And one of the things that's striking is that you've jettisoned many of the things in the novel. It's a wonderful novel, but there are many things that are sort of traditional tropes of fictional storytelling. Hess is called Dahl, I think, and so on. All of that's, most of that has been jettisoned. It's really, so I wanted to ask about that. Coming from this work of fiction, encountering it, and then creating something that's really entirely a thing unto itself.
I think what I tend to do, I read the book and then I didn't read it again. So I read it I literally read it, not intentionally, but I read the book and I sort of feel like I took from the book, I absorbed the book somehow, and then I put the book away, and then I start my process, my journey, I suppose, and I will go back to the book at times, but the kernel in the book, the first spark, really, I think, of the project, not the intention to make it, but the first spark of the perspective that Martin Amis, created in the character of Paul Doll that you mentioned, who was his sort of a fictional creation based on the Rudolf Höss character, the Rudolf Höss person. And I think as I started to read into the sort of source texts that Martin Amis would have obviously read many of as well, that's when I became more and more fascinated, I think, by the kind of terrible ordinariness of the real people, and investigating that and becoming more interested in that, really. And I think that was the thing I was frightened of for so long, is taking that on quite so, in such a kind of direct way. So I looked at indirect ways into this, and I think in a way Martin Amis's book there was an indirectness in the book, in the sense that it was fictional characters. But I think I felt like I was going to I found more fertile material for a film in the real lives.
I mean, but it's interesting in terms of directness and indirectness because, yes, absolutely, there's just something sort of evasive in a way about creating a work of fiction about any event in history, and the Holocaust has its own particular sort of force that fits uncomfortably with that. But this is a masterpiece, among other things, of indirectness, that of what's not shown, what the camera doesn't allow you to see. So in terms of it's part of a sort of a tradition almost of treating the Holocaust, sort of honoring the second commandment of no graven images, that this is something that can only be looked at indirectly. And there's a we were standing backstage and we were talking, and it said that during the shutdown, during the coronavirus, the pandemic shutdown, you had time to go back, and that you were boiling and boiling down. And you also mentioned that there were scenes that had been cut out of the movie. But there's a precision and a coolness to the film. So can you talk? I mean, it's I don't even know if there's a question in there, but it becomes in a way a statement about the process of making art as well as art about the Holocaust. It's also about art about the Holocaust in a way.
Well, I think when you decide to kind of venture into this subject and these events, you're obviously dealing with ethical questions and questions about representation. And I, obviously haven't entered into this lightly by any stretch, but and I think that the two films that we've talked about really, Aslot, from the beginning, was this idea of the film you see and the film you hear. So and in terms of how the craft that's gone into what you see is equivalent to the craft that's gone into what you hear. In other words, it wasn't nothing. That was all that felt very. That felt like that was going to be our threshold between the kind of the directness of the Höss family, who they were, the kind of the ordinariness, the familiarity, the sort of terrible familiarity of them, to be forced into a perspective and into the perpetrator perspective, so that we could really be confronted with our similarities to the perpetrator, and not be able to identify with the victims, in fact, and that was a threshold that we stuck to, and yeah.
Great. And so there's in terms of the look of the film, and Łukasz is reading you in, I'm sure you've been asked about this by everyone who's talked about it, but reading about the use of sort of stationary cameras within the house, and a certain kind of observational quality that that gave. Can you talk about that a little bit, and just the decision to shoot it that way?
So, of course, it was John came with this idea of 10 cameras. We wanted more at the beginning, yeah? 50, but maybe it's good. We could afford only for 10. Well, I think it just comes from this concept of just not judging, just observing, presenting, not glamorizing, and this comes from this concept of just being as objective as possible. When John came to me for the first time, we were talking about the film and script, and we have our first conversations. He just said to me that he would like to have a camera as in one big eye, and then we were just talking how to do that, and just the idea, the whole concept was not to just observe, just to present, and that be as simple as possible. Be don't use any tricks and any kind of vintage look, and because how can we impose and look to this? So that was the idea, just to install the 10 cameras and just observe, and and we have like the house and the garden, so basically we were installing the cameras, like 10 cameras. So sometimes there were like 5 in the garden, 5 in the house, so we could have, we could film action continuously, in the continuity of action. And then, we were prepping everything, and then just after 5 hours, very often it was kind of 5 hours of prep, just finding positions of those cameras. Then we were just leaving, the garden, leaving the house. There was just focus puller. We were going to the basement. We were going to our container, and we were just observing that. Yeah, but that was just kind of, the concept of just observing, just not to interpret this in any way.
Was it also the case, I read that because of the use of the stationary cameras, the number of crew members watching were reduced, or that there was sort of more privacy for the actors? Is that accurate, or is that a...
No, there was no crew members on set. Oh. So that was the whole idea, just to have this set, not like a movie set, just have. We didn't use any lights at all. I mean, we just use practical candles, but we didn't use any film lights, and if we didn't use film gear, just cameras hidden on a little tripods, as small as possible. Like just we tried to make this really small with small lenses. So we were just installing those cameras, and then we were ready. We were just leaving, so there was nobody. There was just, maybe there was a second ID on set. ID, just one ID or 2 people, just passing informations. Sylvia, yeah. And then that's it. Focus pullers were in the basement. We were in a container. So while we were shooting, there was nobody. So then we were just, and of course, when you have 10 cameras, so we have all the setups we need. And when the light was changing, when there was raining, clouds were coming, or dog was passing, so that everything, all those, everything was on 10 cameras. So then after 1 hour, 2 hours, yeah, it was like between 1, 2, 3 hours, yeah, of shooting. Then we had all the setups we needed, and we are done.
It must have decent sense on the set of kind of isolation and loneliness, because I mean most film shoots are they're just hundreds of feet. It's like working in an ant colony, but so it must have been a very quiet, spooky kind of environment for the.
It was like theatre, really. It was trying to create an arena for the actors, so that everything they saw in all 4 directions were real. There was no. They didn't ever see a crew member, a boom mic, or a light, or a screen, or anything. It was just what they saw is what you see, which is the house and the garden and the wall and everything within it. So they believed. I mean, Christian will talk about it, but they came to believe in who they were and where they were. As Łukasz says, the focus pullers were all in the basement of the house. We were all over the wall in a shipping container with monitors. Everything else. It was very much about retreating, and for 2 reasons really. Partly, well, more than 2 reasons, but mainly that the actors were not really. They were just existing. They weren't performing. They were just with each other, and they were feeding off each other's energy. And the other thing, critically, really, was to not get involved in the screen psychologies of the characters, to be able to sort of, so that we as a viewer could project ourselves onto them.
It's amazing. It's also, I mean, because of the gambit of having this monstrosity happening on the other side of the wall, the shot when you finally see the smokestacks from the crematorium. The film has this strange quality of sort of taking all of the individual elements that go to make up a film and making each one of them incredibly dangerous. I mean, the camera angle, every time that sort of shower, which was, I think, the first time we see the smokestacks, you see the dripping shower. So anytime we get near water, and especially that object, you you're watching it, you sort of clench because you're terrified that that the angle is gonna show you above and beyond the wall. And so it's, Johnny, in terms of the sound also, you know, I've read a little bit about, I've read the book and I knew what the film was about. So the very first thing that it's part of the soundscape is this woodpecker, I think. You know, there's some noise, ambient noise in the,
That's right.
and my first thing was, oh, it's a woodpecker. And then I thought, is it a woodpecker? Or is it something else? And I've tried to listen to it again this morning. I've seen the film 3 times now, but there's often beneath the most prominent distant sound something else going on underneath. It could be yelling or screaming or a baby crying, and it could be an innocent thing or something really terrifying. So it's the sound design becomes, you know, carries an enormous weight of responsibility and history in a way. I mean, it is the Holocaust that's happening across the
certainly.
So.
Yeah, and certainly we made it so that at times you are not sure what you're hearing, and I think you know, we did go through the process of obviously making the kind of the family drama that happens in the house, and very much constructing that. And there were, as well as the hidden cameras, there were hidden microphones too, and it was more about capturing, you know, the sound of the people in the house and their movement than particularly the dialogue, you know, and how that worked, more observational. And so we went through the process of making that complete, and the picture edit was quite finished up before we came to introduce, you know, the other sounds that are the bit where you think, you know, well, you can close your eyes, but you can't close your ears, and I can hear that, so, you know, why can't you? And so yeah, it was a long process of months of John and I going through with what I began with about 6 months before the shoot, which was research into, you know, everything that happened at that place in that time, and reading witness statement and understanding what I needed to achieve, so that whilst John was filming film 1, I would have the ingredients ready for film 2, so that we could put that on it. And that didn't happen until about, what, 9 months into post or something, Paul, was that?
Yeah, about May time, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were probably 6 months into the edit.
Yeah, and Eva, you called me before production and said, goodness, I've just realised you're going to need like a whole film soundtrack that we haven't budgeted, or, well, you have budgeted, but there was no kind of production schedule for shooting it. Like.
Yes, because this is really when I remember very well our first Zoom about that, when I had, okay, we are going to shoot 2 films practically, one in sound, one in, you know, one in picture with the sound, which is relevant to the picture, but there is another one, you know, the whole story told with just sound, and I was really, terrified. I was really, you know, frightened. I said, Johnnie, you will have to create all this sound yourself, and we'll have to shoot this sound, and then, you know, this is really, when I was observing the whole process, you know, I realized how brilliant idea of how to do it was. So yeah, it's chapeau bas, Johnnie, really. Yeah.
Thank you. Fortunately, that panic that you had, I had about 2 years before, or when I first had a coffee with you, John, and you discussed that, you know, it was mandatory that we would never see the violence, and that we would need to understand what sound we needed for.
So in the script, our